Right. Can you speak louder? Same. Yeah. My recommendation would be choose every week you should just focus on one. And then you have an assignment, I think, due this coming Sunday. So if you choose one a week, then by the time you get to the assignment, you know. Hello. Is that? Yeah. Okay. Any other questions besides the business kinds? Evelyn? Anything? No? Cynthia? The what? Oh, hedonism? It's really fun. Um, do you like to eat bad food? Like the ones that make you throw up?
I say maybe it depends.
It depends. So,
Like I don't, of course I don't want to throw up, but like,
do you like to engage in conversations that just smell bad?
no.
Do you like to go to places that you're uncomfortable? Do you like a companion that is abusive? Do you like to write essays for classes you don't care for? You're a professional hedonist. It's about pleasure. There is nothing wrong with pleasure, you know. Some people can have casual sex, and they're perfectly fine with it. Some people do have casual sex, but they just kind of feel bad for what they've done. So they go on this fasting period where they're not intimate with anyone until they encounter someone with whom they can have some sort of a meaning, compatibility. So after moments of intimacy, you don't walk away feeling guilty or embarrassed or ashamed. So as you, I suppose, evolve or change or mature, your definition of pleasure changes. But as it stands in its very simple and basic form, without pleasure, life is not worth living. There are people in this class who don't show up very often. They just don't have fun. And I don't want to babysit them. I'm not going to go out of my way to give them pleasure, intellectually speaking. Does that? Yeah. After the death of Socrates, should we talk about him? Well, are there any other questions before we? Yeah? Yeah, Caden?
Does age impart authority?
Hello, Anna. It depends how you age. Robert Redford, he's like 155. Hi. You know who he is, right? You don't know who Robert Redford is? It's like not knowing Jesus Christ. Really? You've never watched like The Horse Whisperer or The Matrix? Well, he didn't play in The Matrix, but no, but he should have been. So there is just something about Robert Redford. I don't know what it is. Or Anthony Hopkins. You know who he is? You must live in a cave. Yeah. So, good morning, Dan. Some people physically just age bad. They're like 20, but they look like 40. You know, some people age well, but they open their mouth and you realize that their mind, their intellect hasn't aged too well. They have no maturity. Some people, depending on their personality type, and I don't want to go into that, but there is a personality type we call number eights. These are like the bosses, the very dominating types of folks. Despite being old and ugly and smelly, there is something about them that's profoundly forceful. What was your question?
Does age impart authority?
Well, I suppose it depends how you express yourself, and it has nothing to do with your age. One of these days you're going to have a child. I hope not, but just in case it happens, you may have a son who is relatively quiet, and you may have a daughter who is relatively loud. And your daughter is much younger than your son, but because of the screaming, she has more power. So in many ways, really, it depends on how you wish to express yourself. Imagine for a moment that you don't think much of me. And every time you come to class, you and I go at it. Jugular to jugular. Once I grow tired of this wrestling match, I just look at it and say, Caden, I'm just going to drop you from the class. It's not so much about age, it's about the power I hold. So there are lots of moving parts. But if by age you mean someone who beholds wisdom, that's a different story. I suppose so. Sometimes you can scream wisdom, like Moses, you can just slaughter people. Sometimes you can be wise like Jesus, very quiet, docile. And sometimes you can be completely mute, not say much. They're all an expression of a good amount of power. Hello. So, yeah. So what else? Anything else? Yeah.
Well, I'd like to talk more about the Enneagram if you like. Do you believe that it's useful?
No. I think Enneagram is very much like astrology. It's very much like the tarot cards. That there is something about us, or even when you call 1-900 psychic, or even when you go to, say, a therapist office, there is something about us that is curious about who and what we are and why we are the way that we are. I mean, that's one of the things that drove Sigmund Freud, for example. From the age, Sigmund Freud has an interesting story in the sense that he was the firstborn. And for those of you in this class who have a sibling, but you happen to be the first child, what usually happens, your parents give you 110% of their attention. I mean, you suck the life out of your parents, And you kind of get used to the fact that whenever you scream or quack, your parents run to you. And that's a lot of power to be had by a 1-year-old. To begin to notice that every time there is anything that's going on with him, all he has to do is just say, Mom, Dad, and they're both running. Then one day your mom comes to you and says, so honey, would you like a sibling? And the 1 or 2-year-old, their frontal cortex has not yet been fully developed. They really don't understand the question. But I suppose if there is this thing called intuition, the 2-year-old looks at it and says, no, I think I'm good. You guys attend to all of my needs. Why would I want a competition out there somewhere? And so after a few weeks, your mom comes to you and says, you're going to have a brother or a sister. And again, the kid doesn't really know what's happening, but time passes. And then this child comes out. And you scream as the firstborn, but your parents are delayed in running to you. And that delay becomes more and more and more as this sibling of yours is growing and has more needs. So Freud experienced that. He had a brother, I think, named Michael. And he came to realize that he no longer has the attention, 100% attention of his parents. So instead of 100%, he has like 60, then it drops to 40, then it drops to 30. And then at the age of 2 or 3, and they were Jew, he sits by his bedside and says, I want my brother to die. I mean, consider the insight given to this 2, 3-year-old to know that he wants all the love and all the attention that his parents can give him. So, he desires his sibling to die, and lo and behold, his brother Michael gets sick and dies. And Freud, of course, assumes that his prayers were heard by the gods upstairs and they were answered, and his brother is gone. And for the rest of his life, from what little I've read of him, that he feels guilty for what he prayed for and for the gods to have listened to him. From a very, very young age, you were just curious as to why we are the way we are. You're a kid, your father walks you around town, and because people just come to realize that his father's a Jew, they push him around, And as a kid, you want to stand up for your dad, but you're too tiny, too weak. And so what pain does for all of us, it forces us to think a little, to reflect a little why things are the way they are. Imagine you're fine the way you are, or your brother is fine the way he is, but there is something going on with you, psychologically speaking. Let's just say you happen to just assume or feel that you're born in the wrong body. You want to be like your brother, but you can't, and you try. And you want to come out, but you can't. In other words, this is what pain does to all of us. Any relationship that suffers some hiccups forces you to sit back and kind of figure out if there's a way out of this. And so, from the age, I think, 13 or so, Freud began to volunteer at some mental institutes to figure out why certain people just go nuts, And he sent his resume, to various psychologists here and there to see if he can work with them. And eventually he gets picked up by a couple. And then it gets time for him to get married, but he doesn't have any money. So he continues to volunteer to get these cheesy jobs with little pay here and there. And his wife, I think, Catherine, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm in the wrong place.
You are, Javon. It's good to see you, though.
Thank you.
Of course. It's Tuesday, by the way. Yeah.
You got tomorrow?
I think so. Yeah, hopefully.
Thank you.
Take care. Anyways, so there is something about all of us, that at times you become curious and interested in figuring certain wrinkles in your life or in your psyche. And so you call 1-900 psychic because you wanted to some extent figure out what your future looks like, what you look like, what sort of relationship you're going to get into. You go to Barnes and Nobles and you go to the self-help section, you get to know tarot cards a little, astrology a little, and enneagrams are no different. That you want to figure out of the 9 points on this 9-pointed diagram, which point do you fit in the most? Are you number 1? Are you number 2 or 3 all the way to 9? Let's say that you really care for your future and you've come to realize that you're a number 4 or you're a number 2 or you're just number 8, let's just say. You're a bossy type. You like to push people around. You like to dominate other people. And you also know the wings that come with each type. You say, well, if I was to go into a relationship with another number 8, who is bossy very much like me, what's going to happen is we're just going to butt heads all the time. He wants to convince me, I want to convince him, and there's going to be a good amount of conflict. I don't want that. I want to go out with someone who is passive. So you'll go out with a number 2, or you go out with a number 3. And these are personality types that are more pleaser types, that they like someone on the top. And an 8 is always on the top. And so because the number 2 or the 3 always desire to please the number 8, we'll say, yes, okay, let's do it. And the most simple version of the personality types, really, you can find them in the Asian, namely the Chinese philosophy, that there are 4 elements. There is the earth, there is water, there is fire, and there is air. Figure out which of these components you are, and make sure, if you're wood, for example, if you're water, you need to make sure that you go out with someone who's like wood. Or you want to go out with someone who's like fire, where you can kind of just get rid of their heat a little bit. So initially they're fun to read and they're fun to study, but after a while you realize that none of those really mean anything. I mean, it's good to know. If you were to kind of go to the bookstore, go to Amazon and buy tons of books on the Enneagram and really learn them really, really well, by the time you're 25, 26, 30, you become very proficient in your knowledge of various personality types from different cultures. And let's say you put them in the closet because you come to realize they're useless, right? And then you find yourself in a gathering, or you find yourself in a classroom, you're teaching a class, whatever. And someone asks you, well, are people all the same? Or do we all come with a different software? And all of a sudden, what you have studied for 10 years and you stored in the closet, you open the door and you bring all the knowledge you have about the Enneagram or personality types out of the closet, and you can give some riveting lecture for the next 5 weeks, and students are amazed. So all the, I think, information that you can kind of store, you won't be able to use them right now, but they're just good to have them. It's like a fridge in the garage where you just put stuff. You will get to a certain place, it's kind of like a savings account. You will come to a certain place in life where you realize that the things you have but you no longer need, maybe 10 years from now, they'll become very, very, very useful. I never wanted to be in the classroom. I never imagined myself to teach. But I read, and I read, and I read, and I read. And I'm here. So, Emmeline.
Do you think the Bible is a book that benefits?
So, whatever information or knowledge you have on the inside, it's a source of power. The question is, how do you want to use the power? Okay. Imagine there's a homeless person on the streets, and you have recently read the Gospel of Luke, and in it says, a human being does not live by bread alone. Okay, and you happen to have 2 Bibles in your backpack. You look at this homeless man and you give him a book. He says, well, can you give me a piece of bread or toast or maybe some money to buy me a burger? You say, no, man does not live by bread alone. So you have the book, you have memorized the passage, but you use it in a very useless way. There's a man who's starving, and you want to throw your power around, in a very callous and infantile way. You have Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses, and all, I suppose, other religious traditions knocking on your door, bothering you on a Sunday. An 18-year-old looks at a 60-year-old man and says, here I am selling you Jesus Christ. And just in case you say, no, I don't want to buy. He says, well, let me come in. I want to save your soul. Look, as an 18-year-old, you're just a piece of shit. You don't know anything from anything. It's best for you to just keep your mouth shut. House yourself in a library somewhere and read books for the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years from different traditions. And then, if any wisdom has been given to you, then sure, come knock on the door and enlighten me. But for now, you just need to keep your mouth shut. The point is, the Bible is a really, really, really good book. It can help you in times of crisis. I mean, imagine if you've been in an abusive relationship and you read Corinthians. Love is this and love is that. It can give you, it's a source of comfort for you. If your parents have died, you know, if life has offered you events that have uprooted your life, the book of Job is profound. If you happen to kind of come to a place where you say, I don't know where I am, I don't know who I am, what I am, Genesis, the creation story, they are wonderful, you know. But these are temporary solutions to life's big psychological problems. You know, in other words, the Bible. Remember, anything that comes to you from the outside, they're like an oasis of sorts for a few days, maybe a few months. You know, go to church. Find yourself a companion who happens to be alcoholic or addicted to something that is destroying your companionship. Continue to quote him the Bible. Continue going to church and pray. Wonderful. There will come a point where the Bible will have an expiration date. You will no longer use it. You will in fact trash it and walk away. You may even question the existence and the compassion of God. Look at You don't have to worry about your physical body in the sense that once you drink coffee, your body knows intuitively how to digest it, how to process, keep the good stuff, get rid of the bad stuff. Intellectually processing food is very, 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 very tough. I mean, you read the Bible. First, you need to understand we came from an oral culture. In other words, like this. I speak and you listen. Now imagine if I was to write my thoughts down and you were to read them. What's going to happen? Well, you're going to inject your own background, your own biases, your own history. It's no longer the things I want you to understand. You understand according to your own capacity. And so you kind of begin to distort all the things that I say. So if you want to understand, for example, what I'm talking about, then what needs to happen is first you need to like me, then I need to kind of just get rid of all the things, all the assumptions you have inside you, then little by little train you how to think. But first you need to feel, then train you how to think. And then after like 10, 15 years, I say it's time for you to leave. But now you have a good filter inside you, you know. So yeah, the Bible is good. It depends who's reading it, you know. It also depends what you want to do with it. If it helps you being more compassionate, that's great. If it helps you being more generous, wonderful. You know, if it makes you drunk with power where you can bully people with, you know, pushing them around with passages, then you're just mean-spirited. The Bible is poison for you. You know, money is great. Not in the hands of Elon Musk, maybe. Anyone else? Caden.
Is a religion based almost entirely on empiricism more beneficial to our understanding of the universe?
No, empiricism is a branch of thought or philosophy that came much later in intellectual development for us human beings. We are faith-based animals. We have been for a long, long, long time. With the scientific revolution, and it began to have a wrestling match with religion. You know, all of this really happened. The Genesis is around 13th century, it blossoms around the 16th century, and then what you have in the presence of René Descartes, for the first time, he really wants to approach religion in a very intellectual way. To some extent he succeeds, but then you get to the 19th century with the existential movement, looking at Descartes saying he messed up philosophy. He messed up human consciousness by kind of deceiving us into thinking that here's the body, here's the mind, and these two, you're either this or the other, you know. I think it's like anything else in life. I meet you in a coffee shop, there is a certain set of feelings that come to me. Those feelings push me towards you. I don't care about your history. I don't care about your abusive past. I don't care anything about you. All I know is that I like you. Why, how, who, it doesn't really matter. The feelings are far too powerful for me to sit back and intellectualize this. And what happens in any feeling or pleasure-driven environment is that eventually I want to hold your hands. Eventually I want some intimacy. Now that our emotions are gelled, and to some extent our relationship has been one of, stability, then all of a sudden cracks begin to appear. You don't take out the trash, you don't vacuum, you don't listen, you're always on your cell phone, you drink too much, smoke too much, you're just a bit too stupid. And then I try to salvage the relationship by bringing my intellect down and trying to figure out what the hell is going on. And then you and I sit and say, so, Keaton, tell me about your past. Now, these are questions I should have asked initially, but these are not the sort of animals, we are not the sort of animals that do this. First, we are guided by our feelings and emotions, and then when cracks appear, or when there are no cracks, it's just that relationships become boring, they're lifeless, and then you try to figure things out. So first, religion, faith, feelings, and then reason. I think. Anyone else? Carmen?
We talk about like philosophy of good leadership.
Isn't it like a class, college success, or success college, or sex in college, or leadership? Imagine you have a friend who happens to be very unattractive. And she or he looks at you and says, Carmen, you're so pretty. Now, ugly people enjoy hanging out with people who are good looking. I mean, imagine if I was to come to class with Brad Pitt, you'd be impressed. How the hell does he know Brad Pitt? Or imagine for Ella, if I was to come to class with Roger Federer, she probably wouldn't leave me alone. Let me have his number. Where did you meet him? All those things. So, in all cases, we find something we idolize in another human being. Now, you could either lead one person, you could lead 25, you can lead 1,000 people. The question in all of this really is, what exactly is it that you're offering? There is nothing wrong with liking Snoop Dogg, or Justin Timberlake, or Lil Wayne. They have something to offer you, and they will lead you towards where they want you to go. It depends what you have to offer. It depends what exactly you're in need for. If, for example, you came to this philosophy class because you really wanted factual information about the history of philosophy and you realize that that's not being given to you, well, I can't lead you. You get bored, you're going to miss a lot of classes, you'll either drop or you'll just fail. If, on the other hand, you came to class and your expectations are being met, the moment I open my mouth, then yes, you can go on your Facebook page and say, yeah, this is a great class. And when I walk to my office, you'll follow me. And if you ask me for books, I can give you some books to read. So it's kind of like, for me to be able to lead you, first you have to like what I have. The cheaper, the more superficial, the easier it is to entice you. The richer, the more in-depth, the more difficult. But the way it starts, I suppose, when you begin to follow anyone. Your question was good leadership, right? Yeah. We haven't even talked about what good is, but I don't really care for that. It's too complicated. If you come to my office and you say, how can I write a good essay? I'll tell you, Carmen, you can't write a good essay. The best you can do is just get an A. And you want to get an A, just follow the 9 points on the guidelines for the reflective essay. But you say, no, I want to write a really, really good essay. So you can't write a good essay. You're 18. Just because you use words, it doesn't mean anything. So good for me in your case is for you to just write an essay to get an A. So you can go to a 4-year school, make something of your life. If you want to write something that you can really understand, well, you have to wait 20 years. So, anyways, I forget. Let's move on. Anyone else? Anna. Sorry, Carmen.
Well, I have I guess, kind of follow-up question, Carmen's, that, like, I don't know how to phrase this, but, like, what you're saying about leadership kind of makes me think of, like, selfish leaders versus, like, selfless leaders. Like, I don't know, like, people who try to lead others for their own gain. But, like, if someone wants to lead or, like, have power over people, can that really be, like, not selfish ever?
Yeah, I'm very selfish when it comes to my kids. I'm a tyrant. I beat them every single day. My will must be done. Am I a tyrant? Yeah. Am I a good leader? Yeah, for them, probably not. You know, what I see in them is not so much where they are right now, but where they could be in about 10, 15, 20 years, should they continue to listen to this tyrant. You know, I'll tell you a story. Some in this class may know a guy named Chris Rubens. He used to work at Zachary's. He went to Berkeley, got his bachelor's in philosophy. And at the time, one of his friends was taking my class. So his friend apparently told him that, yeah, you know, you should check out this class. It's not that great, but it's something interesting. You know, so he comes and sits. This is after he has his bachelor's from Berkeley. And he comes to me after class and he shakes my hand and he says, can I come back again? I say, sure. He comes back on Thursday and I get this feeling that he's a little interested. So he comes and shakes my hand after class again. I say, so what are you doing? So, well, I just got my bachelor's in philosophy from Berkeley. So are you going to continue with school? No. I work at Zachary's. I can talk to my customers about philosophy. And I'm just going to take a break from school. School sucks. Okay? Coming to realize I have a tremendous amount of power over him. I mean, he's a big guy, you know, very muscular, very handsome. I waited for students to leave. It was just me and him in this room. I grabbed him by the throat, pushed him against the wall, kicked him in the nuts. And I say, you can never come back to this classroom unless I see on a piece of paper that you're going to San Francisco pursuing a master's in humanities. He said, okay. Does school suck? Absolutely. When you're 20, you're a hippie. You don't know how to think. You don't even know how to think about your future in a proper way. You're just stupid. And it's not because you're inherently stupid. You don't just have the right information in your head. In this culture, are you kidding? There's so many disadvantages that you have as a young person in this room. Okay. And so he said, why? I don't want to do it. That's what you got to do. And because I had power over him, and because I was a tyrant, and because I was bossy, because I kicked him in the nuts, he comes back next week. A semester before he's done with his thesis at San Francisco, the department chair goes to him and says, listen, would you like to teach a couple of classes at San Francisco State? Yeah. Okay. Then he comes back and says, Amir, I'm done with my master's. Now what? He's teaching a class here now. And little by little, doors opened for him. And now he's at Princeton doing his PhD. The point I'm trying to make is, was I selfish? Yeah. I mean, why the hell would I want to look at someone wasting his life away at Zachary's Pizza or any pizza shop or anything? You know, if you have passion for something, I mean, life is an obstacle. If there is someone who can remove the obstacles for you a little bit, that's great. Was it wrong for me to push him to do something against his will? Well, for him, he thought so. But he didn't have access to how his life is going to unfold 5 years from that point on. And look at him now. And once you have your PhD from Princeton, you bang on any door, those doors will open. And there is more also to that, because you're talking about like a young man who is going to be 35, still very, very young. He's going to be single. But now he has a nice head on his shoulders. He's just not going to go out and have a companion who is superficial. He wants to have like nice conversations late at night. Everything about his life changes. Knowing that he's a bit fickle, you know what I did? I invited him to my house and I gave him a shovel. I can't tell you how many holes he dug in the backyard and the front yard, maybe 100.
Why? Why did they do 100?
Because my will was done.
It was,
Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa.
wait, just quick. Was Chris Rubin the guy who subbed in last year?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was nice looking, no? Did you like his beard? Oh, good. Anyone else? Caden?
I guess you don't learn how to emote, but you learn what to emote at or when to
Sorry, remote?
emote,
Emote, okay.
have an emotion. And for example, you don't learn how to fear, but sometimes you learn what to fear. So I guess my question is like empiricism not part of the human experience?
Let me replace the word empiricism with reason. Is that okay? Have you ever been in a relationship that went bad after a while? That you were hurt? Good job. So how did the relationship begin? With you being rational or you being irrational, i.e. a feeler? Feeler. At what point did you sit back and examine the relationship? Because examining anything is not so much about having your feelings involved, but removing your feelings and having your Messiah, the intellect, come down, dissecting an event, seeing what's inside and trying to figure out. One of the best empiricists was David Hume. You know, all this talk about the self being spiritual, no, that's not true. You're nothing but a bundle of impressions, sensations that you have in your memory bank. That's who and what you are. You know. But you also need to understand that David Hume comes from a tradition where he sees all these countries like fighting one another, all because one is a Catholic, the other is Protestant. You know, one says my religion is better, the other says no, my religion is better. There comes a point he says, you know what, screw this. This is no good. So he sits back and tries to understand. Anything from this side? Lilac? Go ahead.
Sure. Different ancient or ancient Greek, there are narrative cultures non-binary gender systems.
Right.
Sort of acknowledging with outliers.
When you're talking about the Greeks, the Indians of 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 years ago, you're not talking about 21st century America. We had a colleague, not at this campus, but at Sierra College where I used to teach, in Roseville where I used to live a long time ago. Very, very nice man. He was a full-time philosophy instructor, and he created a department that dealt with, all these issues, LGBTQ, and all the numbers that come after it. And one of the books that he had his students read was a book that had to do with the Greeks, how they viewed sex, how they viewed transgender, 1,500-1,600 years ago. Okay. Here's the problem that I see, and I may be completely wrong, and this is not my field. Let me give it to you this way. Over the years of teaching philosophy in the classroom, I've had many students who had expressed interest to go to Iran, my country, and study Persian. Okay. And then get their PhD in Persian literature. And I keep telling them, don't do it. You don't need to go to Persian. You don't need to learn Farsi. You don't need to sing. Just stay here. Finish your school here. They said no. They're there. Okay. Now here's the thing. There is nothing wrong with going to Iran and getting your PhD in literature, okay, Persian literature. Iran is a culture of 4,000 years old. When you're that old, like when you're my age, you begin to realize that your shoulder begins to hurt and you haven't even done anything. Your knees, your back, you can't hear, you can't see, you forget all the time. Okay. This is what culture does. Culture sees events happen, people are broken to pieces. Somehow the culture needs to come in and figure things out for the people. Okay. So if there's an earthquake, it's an act of God. If there's a flood, it's an act of God. These are the narratives that culture creates, and all of a sudden what you have is religion in language, religion in feelings. Add to the fact of politics. You stand in line to get bread. For 2 hours, people talk politics and religion. Some for, some against. Okay. So when you leave America and you go to Iran, what you're missing are the feelings that just the culture gives you the moment you're born. Okay. You can major in African American studies. You will just never have the emotions that live inside a black person. Okay, but you can be very versed in the history of African American studies or experience. Okay. So what you have is all these books and a sort of set of perspectives that came from a culture that accepted all sorts of genders and shades of genders. This is America. America doesn't do that. Christianity doesn't do that. I mean, even if you read the story of Jesus, he was born sexless. Joseph and Mary did not, You know, one day just Mary gets up and says, I think I'm pregnant. And Joseph says, I didn't do anything. Who did it? Well, God. Okay. And the idea of living in a monastery, the idea of being a Jesus Christ who never has sex, doesn't talk about sex, doesn't even know what sex is, it does something to the culture. You know. And then the way this country was born, you know, some people come to realize that Europe has become completely contaminated, corrupted. They come here and they want to purify Christianity. Okay. So is it good that you can go back and read these texts? Yeah. Is it good for you to kind of believe the way ancient Greeks did? Yeah. Can you apply it here? The answer is no. Now, it may be that certain communities are springing up to hold non-binary folks, but what you need to understand is this. For any story to be created, and that story be a good source of nourishment for people, it takes many, many, many hundreds of years and lots of revisions so that it can become part of the fabric of the culture. As long as it's not part of the core, people are still going to remain on the outside. Okay. Now, what happens when something becomes part of the culture, a solid branch of a culture, it means that they have healthy stories in regards to relationships, who they are, what they are, acceptability, how religion fits in. I mean, there are now Bibles that are specifically designed for the LGBT community. Certain verses of the Bible have been omitted. Certain verses have been added just to please a group of people. There is nothing wrong with it. But the point I'm trying to make, for anything new to be accepted in a healthy way, it just takes a long time. Imagine if, again, going back to the example I used the other day, if my son was to come to me and say, Dad, I know you've looked at me as a boy and called me a boy and you give me a boy's name, but the truth is I'm a girl. As a father, it's going to take me some time to adjust. It's not going to be an overnight thing. Okay? I have no idea how I'm going to feel once I take my son out to, say, Roseville, which is a bit more conservative. I'm going to witness emotions coming out of me that are going to make me uncomfortable. Am I going to feel embarrassed? Maybe. Ashamed? Maybe. Am I going to feel angry? Probably. You see the way I look now? I look like a terrorist, right? So when I go to Roseville, you have to see how some people look at me. And I don't know if my feelings are accurate or not, okay? But I was here when 9/11 happened, and I was walking around Roseville, even my own campus where I was teaching. You know, students would ask me if I knew the whereabouts of Osama bin Laden, simply because I'm from the Middle East. So, if, for example, the Bible has condemned homosexuality, that condemnation is going to exist for a long, 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 long time, until it again becomes one of the core branches of this particular culture. Once it happens, you're fine. Until then, struggle. And going back to the Greeks and trying to find some comfort, that's great, you know, but it doesn't answer the difficulties that people will face walking the streets here. Yeah.
Don't you think for like growing up in or the time you spent in Roseville, which is probably more white, I'm guessing, don't you think that for them knowing you and your family, it helped broaden how they thought about the world? Maybe existing, like persevering through the fear and just being yourself, how you are, helps, even if it takes a long time.
I think if you have the capacity to receive anything that goes against the way you are, the way you believe, how you've been raised, because the first order of business for you when you encounter something that's strange in your eyes is that you react. You know, one of the things about children is that as they get older, their taste buds begin to change. So today they don't like milk, but all of a sudden tomorrow they're asking for milk. How, why, who the hell knows? Okay. And I think people, when it comes to the psychological aspect of us, very much the same. that initially they encounter something that just doesn't smell well for them. So they react, and then there's this wrestling match that takes place. Now, whenever anything disturbs you in life, what happens is you lose power. Right now, I'm quite confident that my kids are the way they are. I don't think about them. I'm here rambling on. I go to my office and I write. Now imagine if my wife was to call me and say, did you hear what so-and-so said about who and what he is? Now that stability that I have psychologically is going to go away. And now all these questions are going to come up. Questions for which I have no answers. Now that's going to put me in a weak place. Okay. Now, am I going to embrace the loss of power? No, I'm not going to embrace it because I want my power back. I want stability back. I want to give my brain the attention that it desires, which is attention to books and ideas and this and that. I don't want to think about my kid. That's a waste of time, And yet, he has all of my attention. And I'm held hostage by a set of questions or events to which there are no answers. Okay. Then I struggle and struggle and struggle. Now, I can either convince him, as it happened for a lot of poor folks in this country where being gay was considered to be a disease. Okay, so they would send them to therapists or some institute to ungay them. Okay. Now, is there going to come a time where I am going to accept the fact that my son is ABCD? Yes. Hopefully. When? I don't know. When is my wrestling match with the way my son has turned out going to be over? I don't really know. When the wrestling match is over, and if I've overcome the shame that comes with having brutalized my own child because I wasn't able to receive the message he gave me. Once I overcome that, then I have room to accept him. And in fact, I even have the capacity to stand up for his rights. Consider Mothers Against Drunk Driving, for example. You have a woman who's a housewife, doesn't much care about social life, doesn't much care about political life. Her daughter gets killed by a guy who was drunk behind the wheels. She creates a movement. That's what pain does. Someone who just doesn't care about people drinking, someone who doesn't care about all these companies making billions of dollars, getting people drunk, all of a sudden, because of pain, loss, grief, something happens to her. So right now, I don't read any books about LGBT community or philosophy. I'm not interested. Okay. Should my son come out, I'll be interested. I have no choice. If you happen to be in this class and I like you, and you happen to indicate that you're non-binary, and I like you, and I want to get to know you, the feeling of me liking you will force me to read some books, to get more information, gain some clarity about, what's going on. So some of my interior that could resist to certain truths, they can kind of just fade away. And I could kind of be more embracing of people who are just a bit different. It's one thing to read Shakespeare and say, wow, this is such a great, wonderful thing that he said. Tickle us and we laugh. Cut us and we bleed. Betray us and we seek revenge. And you don't have to be white or black or blue or yellow. If you're a human being, if someone cuts you, you will bleed. But this universal vision is not part of who and what I am. As a bumper sticker, it sounds really good. But I don't live the words. I know the words, I can't live it. It's too much. I can have on my bumper, exercise compassion. But if you're gay, I can't do that. If you're black or brown, I can't do that. But as bumper stickers go, that's a great message. So Yeah. Antoine, yes.
So last class, I asked you if we could use moral reasoning to deduce if torture is wrong, independent of how people feel or what they think about. And you responded that one, people are pleasure-seeking individuals. Two, the way people see pleasure is influenced by their culture. And then three, you gave this example of you sleeping with
The what?
Inuit women.
Okay.
And so I imagine like you use that example to show that, well, in the US, it's just part of our culture to see this as adultery, and adultery is wrong, like a puritanical. But in Inuit culture, that's just actually completely fine.
Okay.
So I'm wondering from this sort of answer that you laid out, would you agree with the premise that social norms, cultural norms, influence or should dictate whether something is moral?
Can I answer your question without talking about your question?
Yeah, go ahead.
You're very kind. I have some very basic, uncontaminated needs. At least that's how I started. I have about 2,000 to roughly 15,000 taste buds. Okay. As a kid, I didn't sit back and study what hunger is or what it does. All I knew is that when I'm hungry, I want some food. And my food was milk. That was it. I was satisfied. I didn't eat because I was bored. I didn't eat because I was frustrated. These are much more complex desires that came much later in my life. And there wasn't yet any advertisement out there that you should drink almond milk as opposed to just regular cow milk. My mom's breast milk was fine. Okay. At a certain point, something interesting happened. It wasn't just milk that she gave me. Some potatoes, some carrots. And now my taste buds began to experience some maturity. When she wanted to give me milk, I said, no, carrots, please. But still, I didn't eat because I was bored or frustrated. I didn't eat because you and I are dating. And even though I am full, for the sake of this date going well, I just overfeed myself. Okay. And my frontal lobe cortex is not yet developed. So I don't really have a memory bank. I just live in the moment, as some of these ridiculous YouTube teachers would say. As I become a bit more mature and I taste carrots, and then I taste potatoes, and then I taste chocolate, I am hungry, but I don't want carrots, nor do I want potatoes. I want chocolate now. And you realize my taste buds are becoming more and more complex. Now comes the more difficult part, which is I walk into the world of advertisement. These are no longer organic basic desires. They become very, very complex because I'm no longer seen by these companies as a human being, but as a customer. Okay? So even my own body becomes a culprit. I am full, but I pass, Zachary's Pizza. I am consumed by the smell. And even though I'm not hungry, all of a sudden I say, maybe I should just go grab a small deep dish. Okay. And I suppose the point I'm trying to make is all of us start life being very simple, very basic, very organic. Little by little, things become complicated. I have no doubt that you have never had korma sabzi. So that particular dish, well, the right answer, Antoine, was no, I've never had korma sabzi. So, which means that your taste buds don't have that experience. And because you've never experienced it, you don't think about it, you don't desire it. But should I give you korma sabzi, and should you desire, your taste buds approve of the ingredients and the seasonings and all that, then 2 days from now, you and your companion will be walking in Berkeley. You pass a Persian shop and you pass a steakhouse, or you pass, I don't know, some burger joint. And your companion says, let's go get a burger. But you say, no, let's have korma sabzi. It's not a basic need. It's very, very complicated. I invited you to my house. You like Persians. You like Persian food. Now, if you become contaminated with Persian poetry, there's a good chance you will dump your companion. Because you would desire a companion who speaks Persian or who enjoys Persian poetry. You are basically your culture. Now, if I was to give this rather weird twist, I would say the following. You're a 40-year-old man. How old are you?
23.
You're a 40-year-old man. Okay. Now, you have a great amount of stories inside you, given to you by your culture. You have desires, you have traumas, you have all sorts of things. You're not going to take anything that I say seriously. It's not possible. For you, it's a hit and run. And let's just say you're somewhat of an intellectual, a curious type. You talk to your companion about this and that. Nothing wrong with that. But you use me as a source of conversation with your companion to inject some life into your relationship. I can't occupy too much space inside you because you're already full. Now, the next question I suppose would be, well, how do I give you my culture? And I'm not just talking about being Persian. My own experience. How do I give those to you? Well, I have to demonize your culture first. And I don't need to come out and say your culture is awful. I'll just talk and talk and talk and talk. You will continue to ask questions. At a certain point, you realize you have no questions. In fact, you don't know how to ask the right questions. In fact, you're just stupid. And little by little, when you go home and you want to talk to your companion, you realize you have nothing to say to her either. And then you say, what the hell happened to me? Well, as you became less of your culture, you started becoming a little bit more of me. That's what culture does. That's what experiences do. If those experiences have the power to make a home inside you. The only thing you can really hope for is make sure that if there are any experiences coming into your life, they are ones that hopefully, eventually will benefit you. That's all. You know, consider the question that you sometimes ask about, is it cruel to have children? This is not a question that you would encounter 50 years ago. You wouldn't ask this question 100 years ago. They don't ask it in India, they don't ask it in Arabia, they don't ask it in Persia, they don't ask it in China. You ask it here. Why? Well, look at this culture. Look at the way this culture makes human beings. Look at how long it takes people to get married. How old are they? You know, by the time a woman figures out what she wants to do, she's like 35. By the time a man tries to figure out what he wants to do, he's like 45. So you spend like the first 30, 40 years of your life trying to figure out who and what you are in a culture that doesn't really give you much. Is it cruel to have kids at that stage? Absolutely. But now, at the age of 40, 45, you say, oh, I think I want children. But people in other countries don't live like this. They get married at the age of 20. There is no divorce. And if there is, there's going to be a good amount of shame, right? They'll do their best to keep the marriage going. They'll have children. They are the glue to the life. That's it. They don't ask, is it wrong to have children? Only in industrialized, advanced, technological countries do you ask these questions. Or maybe just people in poor countries just have no money. They don't, have as many children perhaps. Or maybe it's the only source of entertainment, sex. So there are lots of, again, parts to all of this. Caden?
I was gonna say in China until 2016, I believe you're only allowed to have one children, and now you're only allowed to have three. So I don't know if that's necessarily true.
True. Anyone else before we... Oh. Is there a quickie out there? Justin? You like Harry Potter, huh? Yeah. That's it? No one else? Yeah.
Do you believe in sentience? And then if you do, what qualifies? Like, what requires? Like,
I don't know what sentient is.
Yes. That makes it more difficult. How about consciousness?
No. It's just an empty cup, and in it is just junk. I mean, that's what it is. In ego, consciousness, all these big words that people use. You just have an empty bucket, and little by little things go in it. And that just becomes who you are. And I don't know cosmic consciousness. I don't know what that means. I don't know, like, spiritual consciousness. So, yeah.
How about an ability to feel pain?
I don't like torture, but I have a lot of friends that were political prisoners and they were tortured back home. And they realized that the only way they could survive the torture is by always remembering why they went into the political sphere. They wanted justice and equality. They wanted people to be happy. They wanted everyone to have a gallon of milk. Iran, it happens to be one of the richest countries on this planet, and yet it's very poor. It's because mostly of the West, And so these prisoners would say, I just don't want Western powers to have such a heavy hand in where this country is going and in what direction. And so when they were caught, when they were tortured, they said, we only imagined justice. We lived in our heads, and our heads creates fantasies about justice, about fairness. And as long as you can live in your head, you don't live in your body as much. So you don't feel pain as much. It's good to see all of you. Have a nice day. See you Thursday.